remember that morning with an odd mix of excitement and nerves. The sunlight streamed through the half-open blinds, painting stripes across my bedroom floor, and I felt more than ever that today wasn't just any day. It had been years of quiet hesitation, hidden desires, and secret reflections, but today I told myself, today I would finally confront who I really was. I had spent so long hiding behind baggy clothes, avoiding mirrors, and pretending that the flutter in my chest when I saw soft fabrics or pastel colors was nothing. But the reflection I saw in my own eyes this morning told me that the truth couldn't be ignored anymore. I opened my closet, staring at the rows of clothes I'd always thought of as forbidden, or at least unnecessary. A soft blush pink blouse caught my eye first. It was delicate, airy, and seemed to whisper promises of a side of me I had kept tucked away. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for it, my heart racing with a combination of fear and anticipation. I knew that putting it on wouldn't just be about clothing. It would be a statement, a small yet powerful declaration of my self-acceptance. As I dressed, each movement felt like peeling away layers of a long-concealed secret. The blouse slid smoothly over my shoulders, the fabric gentle against my skin, sending shivers down my spine. I paired it with a skirt I had always admired from afar, one that swayed lightly with each step. Standing in front of the mirror, I barely recognized the person staring back at me. It wasn't just the clothes. It was the confidence, tentative but undeniable, that radiated from my own reflection. My chest tightened with a strange, exhilarating mixture of relief and joy. For the first time in years, I felt aligned with myself. I sat on the edge of my bed, breathing deeply, letting the moment sink in. Memories of all the times I had suppressed this part of me came flooding back. The teasing from friends when I expressed interest in girly things, the guilt I felt for enjoying it despite social expectations, the secret shopping trips where my hands shook with nervous excitement, all of it seemed to converge in this quiet morning. I realized then that my journey wasn't about rebellion, nor about shock or performance. It was about honesty. Honesty with myself, the person I had been hiding from for far too long. There was a knock at my door and my heart jumped. It was my roommate, completely oblivious to my internal revelation. I forced a calm laugh and called out that I was just getting ready. As the door closed again, I allowed myself a small, private smile. Today would be different. I would go out into the world not as the version of me I had been trying to fit into someone else's mold, but as me, the real me, the me that I had spent years afraid to embrace. I spent the next hour preparing carefully. I experimented with makeup, something I had always dabbled in secretly. A light sweep of foundation, a touch of blush, a hint of lipstick. The transformations felt magical. My features softened, my eyes sparkled differently. And for the first time I didn't feel like I was pretending. Felt alive. The reflection before me no longer carried shame or fear. It carried a quiet, unspoken joy. I slipped on my shoes and took a deep breath, standing fully in front of the mirror. The city outside waited, indifferent yet full of possibility. But I knew that stepping out that door wouldn't just be a casual act. It would be a challenge, a test of my courage, a first chapter in the story of accepting myself fully. The butterflies in my stomach weren't anxiety. They were exhilaration. I was ready. As I opened the door, sunlight washed over me, warm and forgiving, and I realized that happiness wasn't about the world accepting me. It was about me accepting myself. Today I was stepping into a new reality, one where my feminine self was not a secret but a part of my everyday life. And somehow, that thought brought a calm determination that steadied every step I took. Stepping outside felt surreal. The familiar streets looked the same, but my perception of them had shifted. Every passerby, every glance, suddenly carried weight in a way it never had before. Not in a judgmental sense, but in a way that made me hyper-aware of my own presence. My heartbeat was steady, but there was an undercurrent of tension. The world hadn't changed, but I had. And with that realization came both thrill and fear. The walk to the cafe was longer than usual because I kept pausing, almost mesmerized by the reflections in the shop windows. I caught sight of myself in one display, a glimpse of the skirt swaying, the soft blouse hugging my form, and the gentle curve of my hair falling past my shoulders. A smile tugged at my lips, one I couldn't suppress, no matter how nervous I felt. There was something liberating about seeing myself unfiltered, without the mask I had worn for so many years. Inside the cafe, the warm aroma of coffee and pastries filled the air. I took a seat near the window, trying to appear casual, though inside, every nerve seemed alive with electricity. When the barista called out my order, I realized I had almost forgotten the mundane details of life. Ordering a latte, paying with a card. But even these small, everyday actions now carried a sense of triumph. It wasn't just about being seen. It was about existing comfortably in my own skin. A couple of familiar faces entered the cafe, and a pang of anxiety shot through me. Friends I hadn't yet told about my journey were there. For a moment I froze, contemplating whether to shrink back into the old version of myself or to stay true to the courage I had found this morning. Then I reminded myself of the reflection in the mirror, of the small, exhilarating joy I felt when I dressed and styled myself today. Their opinions were just noise. I had finally begun listening to my own voice. I spent the next hour immersed in people watching, my eyes tracing the effortless confidence of strangers, many of whom didn't even realize the power of how they presented themselves. I imagined the countless what-ifs of my past, the times I had silently envied those who moved through the world without hesitation. But today was different. Today I wasn't envying. I was participating. Every small gesture, sipping my latte, adjusting my hair, crossing my legs, felt like a celebration of who I truly was. Later, as I walked through the park, the wind teasing my hair, I felt a strange, almost magical connection to everything around me. Leaves swirled at my feet, children laughed nearby, couples walked hand in hand, and I felt none of the alienation I had always carried. There was a rhythm to life that I had been out of step with for years, but now, each step I took aligned me closer to that rhythm. The skirt fluttered lightly in the breeze, and I laughed quietly at the delight it brought me. It was absurd, simple, and utterly freeing. By the time I returned home, dusk had settled, casting a soft, golden glow across the city. I paused at my front door, lingering just long enough to reflect on the day. It wasn't perfect. There were fleeting moments of self-doubt, a slight quiver of insecurity. But overall it was a victory. I had confronted the world as myself, and more importantly, I had confronted myself without shame. Once inside, I sank into the comfort of my bedroom, the familiar soft lighting now feeling like a warm embrace. I looked around at the small, quiet space that had been my refuge for so long, realizing that it had witnessed countless moments of uncertainty and hidden longing. Today, it had become a sanctuary of affirmation, a place where my journey could continue uninterrupted. Sitting on the bed, I traced my fingers along the fabrics I had so carefully chosen that morning. Each piece was more than just clothing. It was a statement, a token of acceptance, a symbol of courage. I realized then that transformation wasn't about a single moment or outfit. It was about consistency, about giving myself permission to exist fully as who I was meant to be. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe that I could maintain this authenticity every day. The days that followed were a delicate dance between excitement and uncertainty. I quickly discovered that living openly as my feminine self wasn't as simple as stepping outside in a pretty outfit. It was a test of patience, resilience, and trust in my own judgment. Each morning brought a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Would people notice? Would they judge? Would they accept the new me, or worse, dismiss it? Yet, with every outfit I carefully chose and every step I took, a new layer of confidence settled within me. One afternoon, I decided to attend a small social gathering, something I had always avoided. The thought of being surrounded by friends and acquaintances, fully presenting myself without pretense, made my stomach twist nervously. But deep down I knew that this was a crucial step. I had spent years hiding fragments of myself, and now it was time to see if the world could accommodate the whole me. As I entered the room, my nerves were palpable, but so was my determination. People glanced at me, some with recognition, others with curiosity. I smiled, feeling the familiar thrill of being seen, yet not needing approval. A close friend approached, raising an eyebrow with a questioning look. Felt my pulse quicken. You look different, they said cautiously. I laughed softly, a little nervous. Yeah, I've been exploring something new. Trying to be more me. The room was quiet for a moment, and I braced myself for rejection, for jokes, for judgment. But then, slowly, the friend smiled. I like it. You look happy. And honestly, that's what matters. That simple affirmation was transformative. I realized then that the most powerful validation doesn't come from others. It comes from recognizing your own joy and living unapologetically. I spent the rest of the evening observing myself in this new light, noticing how my body carried itself differently, how my gestures softened, how my laughter felt more genuine. Every subtle change was a thread weaving me closer to the person I had always been underneath. Yet not every moment was easy. One evening, a pang of insecurity struck me unexpectedly while shopping for a new outfit. I caught my reflection in a store mirror, and for a fleeting second, old fears resurfaced. The fear of ridicule, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear that this identity was a temporary thrill rather than a true reflection of myself. My hands shook slightly as I touched the fabric of a dress I had been considering. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, centering myself. This isn't about them, I whispered internally. This is about me. Always has been. When I opened my eyes again, I chose the dress, feeling a quiet pride in my decision. That night, I wore it at home, twirling slowly in front of the mirror, and for the first time, I felt entirely unshackled by doubt. It wasn't just clothing that transformed me, it was the way I began to see the world. Colors became richer, textures more intriguing, and even ordinary interactions felt layered with possibility. Every compliment, every subtle acknowledgement, felt amplified because I knew it was rooted not in pretense but in truth. I started journaling my experiences, recording each step of my journey. The moments of joy, the stumbles of insecurity, the surprising affirmations that kept me going. My writing became a mirror, reflecting not just the outward changes but the evolution of my inner self. There were moments of unexpected connection, too. One afternoon, while waiting for the bus, a woman commented on my earrings with a warm smile. "Those are lovely. They suit you," she said. Something in the simplicity of her words struck me. No judgment, no overthinking, just a recognition of who I was. That encounter, brief as it was, reinforced a realization that had been growing inside me. The world isn't always harsh. It's the lens we choose to see it through that colors our experience. By the end of that week, I noticed a shift that went beyond appearance. My movements were more fluid, my expressions more open, my laughter more spontaneous. There was a serenity in my steps, a quiet affirmation in my choices, a sense of alignment between how I felt inside and how I presented myself outside. Each day I felt a little more whole, a little more at peace. The turning point came on a quiet evening, one I hadn't expected to be different from any other. I was sitting by the window, watching the sky shift into hues of lavender and gold as the sun slowly dipped below the horizon. The soft glow painted the room in a gentle warmth, and for a moment everything felt still, peaceful. It was in that calm silence that the weight of my journey settled on me all at once. Every step I had taken, every moment of bravery, every trembling decision, all of it gathered into a single realization. I wasn't just experimenting anymore. I wasn't trying on an identity to see how it felt. I was living it. I traced my fingers along the hem of the dress I wore, the soft fabric whispering against my skin. A week ago this would have felt like a costume. Today it felt like a second skin. Something inside me stirred, an emotional swell I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't sadness nor fear. It was relief. A profound, overwhelming, nearly breath-stealing relief. For years I had carried a quiet ache inside me, a sense of incompleteness I couldn't name. And now, sitting in that fading light, I finally understood the source of it. I had been missing myself. Tears welled in my eyes unexpectedly. Not out of disappointment or confusion, but out of the sheer emotional weight of finally seeing myself clearly. I let them fall freely, each tear a small release, A tiny farewell to the years of pretending, hiding, denying. The person I had been was not wrong, but they had been incomplete, fragmented. And now, for the first time, those fragments were coming together into a full picture. The next day, something inside me felt different. Steady, grounded, quietly sure. I dressed with intention rather than hesitation, choosing an outfit that felt gentle and expressive. The mirror reflected someone familiar yet transformed, someone whose eyes held a softness I had never seen before. I didn't smile at my reflection. Instead, I breathed, deeply, calmly, with acceptance. Later, I visited my parents' home, an unexpected impulse pushing me forward. They had always been loving, but I had never allowed myself to share this part of me with them. My hands trembled as I rang the doorbell, my nerves threatening to unravel everything I had built within myself. When my mother opened the door, her eyes widened, not with shock, but with a kind of quiet surprise. The kind that asked 100 unspoken questions. We sat at the table, the atmosphere thick with hesitation and hope. I explained slowly, choosing my words carefully. I told her how long I had carried this part of myself, how frightened I had been, how relieved I felt now that I was finally embracing it. My voice wavered, but it didn't break. I expected resistance, maybe confusion or disappointment. But instead, my mother reached out and gently placed her hand over mine. "I always wondered when you would let yourself be happy," she said softly. Her acceptance hit me harder than I expected. It felt like someone had opened a window in my chest, letting all the trapped air escape. I didn't realize how badly I needed those words until I heard them. And just like that, another thread of fear unraveled within me. My father was quieter, more reserved. He studied me for a long moment before speaking. "You're still you," he finally said. "And that's all I care about." It wasn't poetic or emotional, but it was honest, and that honesty wrapped itself around me like a protective shield. That visit became a defining moment. Not because everything was perfect, not because the world suddenly became free of challenges, but because I saw myself through my parents' eyes and realized something crucial. The people who truly loved me never needed me to fit into a box. They just needed me to be real. Over the next few days, I felt a shift in my steps, a confidence that wasn't loud or bold but steady and consistent. My daily routines felt different because I felt different. I no longer tiptoed through life, afraid of who might notice or what they might say. I walked with purpose, knowing that my truth was nothing to hide. Yet, even with this newfound peace, there were moments of vulnerability, small, fleeting doubts that whispered, "Are you sure? Will this last?" But each time they crept in, I countered them with the memories of my own reflection, the warmth of my mother's hand, the quiet support in my father's voice, the gentle kindness of strangers, and the strength I had uncovered within myself. Transformation wasn't a single moment. It was a continuing journey. And I was finally ready to walk every step of it. Not in fear, but in hope. In the days that followed, the world around me seemed to move at its usual pace, but something within me had shifted in a way I could no longer ignore. Every morning, I woke up feeling a little lighter, as though the weight I'd been carrying for years had finally begun to lift. The mirror no longer felt like an obstacle. It felt like an invitation. I found myself looking into it not to search for flaws or hide discomfort, but to understand myself more deeply. Each reflection showed a version of me that felt clearer, more honest, more whole. But with this rising confidence also came an unexpected tension, a quiet fear that sat somewhere deep in my chest. What if all of this was temporary? What if the courage I felt could crumble in the face of a harsh remark or a wrong stare? What if the acceptance I'd received from my parents was a fragile first step, rather than a foundation I could truly stand on? There were moments when these thoughts swirled around me like a cold breeze, reminding me that growth, even beautiful growth, doesn't come without questions. One evening, while walking home, I caught my reflection in a darkened shop window. The streetlights painted a soft glow on the glass, and I paused to look. The person staring back at me looked calm, poised even, but my eyes held a depth of emotion I could barely name. Was it happiness? Fear? Gratitude? Felt like all of them at once. My reflection didn't look like an act or a disguise. It looked like truth. And confronting that truth head-on made my heart clench with a mix of pride and vulnerability. Later that night, I received a message from an old friend, someone who hadn't seen me in years. They wanted to reconnect, suggesting we meet for coffee. My first instinct was to hesitate. Would they understand? Would they question me? Would they see the real me or only the version of me they remembered from years ago? I almost typed an excuse, something simple and dismissive, but I stopped myself. I had spent too long letting fear guide my actions. This time I wanted to act from a place of honesty. We met at our old favorite cafe. I arrived early, the soft hum of quiet conversations filling the room. My fingers tapped nervously against my cup as I waited. When they finally walked in, their expression froze instantly, not in shock, but in a moment of recognition that took them a few seconds to process. I felt a spike of panic shoot through me, but I held my breath and lifted my chin gently, meeting their gaze. They sat down across from me, their eyes scanning me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Then, slowly, something softened in their expression. "You look different," they said. "But you also look like you've finally found yourself." Their words landed with unexpected weight. I hadn't realized how desperately I needed someone from my past to see me for who I had become, not who I had been. We talked for hours. About life, about change, about the quiet struggles that shape us in ways others often overlook. At one point they leaned back and said, "You know, I always felt like something about you wasn't fully expressed before. But now, you seem complete." That simple observation cracked something open inside me. It wasn't just about clothes or appearance. It wasn't about blending in or standing out. It was about wholeness, about finally allowing my inner self and outer self to align without apology. When I walked home later that night, the city felt different, more open, more welcoming. The cool evening air brushed against my cheeks, carrying with it a sense of promise. This journey wasn't about reaching a final destination. It was about understanding myself more deeply with every passing day. And while moments of fear still lingered, they no longer held the power to overshadow the joy that had begun to bloom inside me. At home I stood in front of my mirror one more time. Not to examine, not to judge, but simply to witness. I touched my cheek lightly, tracing the faint blush that lingered there. I whispered softly to my reflection, "You're finally becoming who you were meant to be." And in that quiet room, those words felt like a vow, a promise to keep choosing myself, even when doubt tried to creep in. I turned off the lights and lay in bed, the softness of the pillows comforting me. I stared at the ceiling, feeling a calm warmth spread across my chest. Acceptance wasn't a single moment. It was a steady, continuous choice. And tonight I felt ready to keep choosing it. The next week unfolded like a series of quiet revelations. Each day taught me something new about myself. Small lessons, subtle moments of clarity that began shaping my understanding of who I was becoming. I noticed how much more freely I moved, how my body language softened, how my smile came more naturally. It wasn't just about appearance anymore. It was about the way I felt when I walked through the world. There was a gentleness inside me that had long been buried under layers of uncertainty, and now it was finally being allowed to breathe. Still, transformation isn't a straight line. Some mornings, I woke up feeling grounded and calm, ready to face the world exactly as I was. But other mornings brought a strange heaviness, a quiet doubt that whispered through my thoughts. I would sit at the edge of my bed, staring at my reflection, wondering if I was truly ready for whatever came next. Not because I regretted anything, I didn't, but because the journey into authenticity often requires confronting shadows I had long ignored. One afternoon, while walking through the city, I heard someone call my old name from behind me. The voice was familiar, sharp, full of memories I'd tried not to revisit. My breath caught for a moment and I froze. When I turned around, I saw someone from my past. A former coworker, someone who had known a version of me that no longer existed. Their eyes widened as they looked me over, confusion clouding their expression. I felt my pulse race, but I steadied myself. There was no need to hide or shrink back. Not anymore. I offered a gentle smile and greeted them calmly. For a moment they said nothing, just stared, trying to reconcile the person in front of them with the person they once knew. Finally they spoke. "You've changed." "Yes," I replied quietly. "I have." They didn't say anything unkind, but the awkwardness in their voice stung slightly. After a brief, uncomfortable exchange, they left, and I found myself standing alone in the crowd, feeling exposed. The confidence I had built over the past weeks trembled a little, like a flame flickering in the wind. I took a deep breath, blinking away the sudden wave of doubt. Moments like this were inevitable. People from my past weren't obligated to understand my transformation instantly. Their confusion didn't diminish my truth. I walked toward a nearby bench and sat down, letting my emotions settle. The city noises surrounded me. The distant chatter of families, the hum of traffic, the soft rustling of leaves overhead. As I watched people pass by, a simple realization washed over me. I wasn't doing this for anyone else. Not for acceptance, not for approval. This journey was mine. And it was okay if others needed time to catch up. That evening, I met with a close friend who had been quietly supportive since the beginning. They noticed my shaken expression immediately and asked what had happened. As I shared the encounter, they listened without judgment, their presence grounding me. When I finished, they placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "You don't owe your past self to anyone. You're allowed to move forward. You're allowed to redefine your future." Their words lingered long after I returned home. In the mirror, I saw the faint traces of uncertainty still clinging to my expression, but beneath that, I also saw strength, real, growing strength. I realized then that transformation isn't just about embracing beauty or softness. It's about learning to withstand the moments when everything feels fragile. It's about nurturing yourself through the storms that come after the sunshine. Over the next few days, I made a conscious decision to lean into joy whenever it appeared. I treated myself gently, choosing outfits that brought me comfort rather than pressure. I surrounded myself with people who supported my growth. I journaled more deeply, writing about the fears that still surfaced and the dreams I hadn't dared to express before. Slowly, those dreams began to take shape in my mind. Dreams of living fully, not just surviving. There was one night, especially quiet, when I stood by my window again, looking out at the city lights twinkling like scattered stars. My reflection appeared faintly in the glass, blending with the view outside. It struck me suddenly how far I had come. How the person staring back at me no longer felt like a stranger. How each day brought me closer to a version of myself that felt whole, peaceful, and authentically real. For the first time, I whispered into the stillness, "I'm proud of you." It felt strange talking to my own reflection like that, but necessary. Because if I couldn't acknowledge my own strength, how could I expect others to see it? The words hung in the room, gentle and sincere, wrapping around me like the comfort of warm fabric. And for the first time since this journey began, I didn't just feel transformed, I felt ready. Ready to own my life. Ready to move forward without apology. Ready to accept that this path wasn't temporary. It was the beginning of who I truly was meant to be.